Hello, I'm Kate Scott-Dawkins from WPP Media. I'm here with Brian Berner, Global Head of Ad Sales for Spotify. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're in Cannes, day one. Very
Yes.
exciting.
Yes.
Yes, already warm.
Scorching. Already scorching.
It's only 9 a.m. when we're recording this, and it's, already hot. You've been to Cannes several times, or?
Yeah, I think this is maybe only my 11th can.
Only your life.
But yes, yeah.
I'm on 3, so
you're on
you have
3?
me, yeah.
All right, yeah.
So look, I'm super excited to talk to you today. We just released our new global industry forecast this year, next year. We talked about it a little bit before this. You've read through it recently. Would love to just chat through a couple of the findings and actually then hear about, what you're seeing at Spotify and how you're either taking those insights or finding insights that are similar to what we're talking about in terms of growth.
Great. Absolutely.
So I guess first, though, a little bit of background. You've been at Spotify for a while. Do you remember what first interested you in advertising, or sort of your journey in early ad or campaign that you worked on that you saw that really sparked an interest?
Yeah. I'll I'll answer both parts of that. So first, the advertising one is easy. So I went to university at, originally from Chicago, went to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. But one of my jobs I worked in school was at the Daily Illini selling ads.
Mm-hmm.
So I really lucked out in life where at 20 years old, I just found my calling, absolutely fell in love with advertising, the creativity, the people. So from that job in school, that immediately just set my sights and passions on getting into the industry. So what I would say is some 20 odd years later, I still think everything about advertising is amazing. I truly do love it with how creative it is, the people, the constant innovation and changes. When it comes to the second part of your question about an early ad campaign, there's been obviously incredible ad campaigns over the year, but as I was thinking through things, one that I'll give a quick plug to Spotify, but so I'm approaching 14 years at Spotify. I joined in 2011 when it was first launching in the US, and that was the 7th country it was launching in. So pretty astounding to see where we were versus where we are today. But there was this very inspiring campaign where one of our launch sponsors was with General Motors they were promoting the Chevy Sonic at the time.
Okay.
And you might remember this, but they had this iconic commercial of the Sonic launching through the air. They were doing a big stunt, and they had the song "We Are Young" by the band Fun perform. But what I loved about that commercial is, one could argue at the time, Fun was just breaking. They were an emerging artist at the time, and obviously that's a hit song, and it would have been amazing, no matter how it broke. But you could argue that commercial really, accelerated them and the discovery of them. But point being is why that commercial, or that campaign for that matter, made an impact on me is because I think back to my point about why I love advertising, it was a great example of when advertising's done right, how much it can live at the intersection of culture, music, discovery, and really influence, consumer sentiment. I would say, that's a great example of a campaign that I remember.
I love your career has sort of spanned and taken a similar trajectory to overall advertising, right? If you think back to 2000, print was over 50% of advertising revenue, if you can believe that today, all the way through to, now audio and video within audio, right? We have, as I mentioned, we'll get into the categories and how we categorize media, because that gets blurrier and blurrier every year. But just to touch on the overall outlook for the year. So we released our forecast. We're now expecting 6% growth this year. We had said 7.7% in December. So a little bit of a downgrade, mostly based on sort of the geopolitical and economic realities that we're in today. So still projecting growth, absolutely. And probably even a little bit more resilience among the largest brand advertisers, even than potentially some smaller businesses that may be a little bit more impacted Does that sort of mesh with what you're seeing and hearing at Spotify? What are you excited about for the rest of this year? I mean, we are halfway through already.
Yeah. No, I think a lot there. So what I would say is like some similarities to the report as to like where we sit is like your overall forecast like is a little different than where we sit in the ad ecosystem, right? So everything, I would say like ton of variances by country, by vertical. And the other truth is it feels like it's changing on, if not a monthly, a weekly basis, right?
Or daily.
Or daily for that matter. But, I think also where Spotify sits at the intersection of like either digital or even, streaming, we're seeing a lot of opportunity and continued, innovation and growth with our partners. What I will say, though, that's been interesting as I was like reading through the report and finding similarities as to like what we're seeing versus like the larger industry globally versus by country is what I can say that has been very clear and consistent because of the uncertainty or just constant change is you do see a lot of marketers, I think holding back, more so looking for flexibility and agility in their decision making. And I think you've seen a lot of shifts in budget from maybe the traditional upper funnel brand awareness pre-plan for the year into more of like either programmatic, self-service, hands-on keyboard, where they have a lot more control over their campaigns.
And the message can suit the moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's where I would say like if there's one consistent global similarity, it's, that continued focus and emphasis on flexibility, digital advancements or agility with targeting, and then measurement. Measurement is, even though I've been in the digital side forever and measurements always come up, how much it is just consistently a part of the discussion now more so than ever before.
Yeah, I think when brands and CFOs in a year where they're really looking at the lines quite closely, the line items quite closely, I think then there's a real push to effectiveness and how are we measuring this and how can we prove it out for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we've talked about digital, audio, video, Spotify sort of spans all of those things now, right? One of the big changes we made in how we discuss our forecast this year was a recategorization of the big buckets that we put things into. So moving away from a world where at the top line we're talking about TV versus digital or audio versus digital, and transitioning to a world where I hope we're looking at it in a way that is more nuanced and more akin to how clients are thinking about it, right? So content-driven advertising is now, in our mind, the largest sort of super category.
Okay.
58% of media ad revenue, and covers TV, audio, print, magazines, and newspapers, all of that together. And the reason that we think that works is because clients are thinking about the brand equity of whatever content they want to be seen next to or around.
Yeah.
Right? And within sort of this content space, I think the biggest change has been a shift from professional producers to user-generated or like lots of small influencers, and the spillover from, again, audio to video and tech. And so what's one way that when you're thinking about how you talk to customers about the opportunity with Spotify, and the content that's available on the platform, how do you describe that, and how do you talk to clients about the range of products or how they should think about video podcasts versus streaming audio?
Great question. I would think about that. So let me answer it how we talk to clients. For me, I try and keep it as simple as possible. I think one of my challenges, I would say, to the industry that has to evolve, and I love how you're thinking about creating this new view of content, is that the industry is still very much planned as maybe here's my video bucket versus my audio bucket versus print, or so on and so forth. So from that perspective, how do we talk about clients? I would just tell you to take a step back. It's attention. One of the things you called out in your report is the growing emphasis on attention. And it's something that's like very top of mind for us because I think the content landscape is becoming very fragmented. To your point, what's professional versus UGC, and even UGC is now becoming professional, et cetera, et cetera. So it is very difficult to almost like if you were on the marketing side of the house to keep up with all these different trends. But at the end of the day, advertising is all about trying to, serve the right message to the right user in the right moment. And when I think of Spotify, objectively, the thing that is very, very top of mind for me is that this is where consumers are spending their time. They are on Spotify for over 2 hours per day at any given moment. So when I think about how we talk about all those different buckets, even how our platform has evolved from music to podcasts to now audiobooks, we're leaning into video podcasts now, music videos. At the end of the day, it's like it just dials back to where your consumers spending their time, their attention. And I would argue, in spirit of being at Cannes, Spotify is a place where, not only does brand storytelling still live, but quite frankly, it still thrives. So, I would say like to boil it down, like there's always going to be different updates and ad formats that go along with it. But at the end of the day, consumer attention, consumer time spent and engagement is always going to be our consistent message to our partners.
Yeah. And it's, a place where absolutely it is still individual people listening, right? I think one of the other segments and things we spend a lot of time talking about in the report is AI and how we are in this brand new world of AI agents potentially taking on more and more of the consumer journey. And the potential for sort of these bifurcating messaging tracks for brands where on the one hand they're speaking to humans and people about things on, I think, very effective and high impact channels like, say, TV or out of home or audio, versus potentially some messaging that gets directed almost more directly to bots, right? In a world where all bot traffic was bad potentially into a world where that's not necessarily the case. It's a huge sort of change, I think, for the way people are thinking about marketing and the consumer journey overall. What is, we talk about AI a lot in the report. How are you thinking about it? How are you applying it within Spotify? What are you talking to customers about with that?
So, great question. Let me break that apart about like how we're thinking about it for Spotify versus like how we're thinking about it for customers, right? Spotify, what I would say is arguably one of the leading platforms leaning into AI. So even at its early onset, how we were leveraging AI was just kind of the evolution of this processing power of creating further advancements within personalization and discovery. So think about years ago, we launched AI Playlist. We then launched AI DJ, which I'll maybe comment on later with some of the innovations there. But at its early onset, it just really made it easier for putting the customer first about how do you take all of this content and change? Because, right, we talked about marketers, but pivot to the customer view, you have music, podcasts, audiobooks, video, et cetera. So really, like, we always have to start from a place of what's easiest for the customer. And I think that's a good example of like how we're leveraging AI to just further enhance personalization and discovery. If you haven't checked out Daylist, definitely go into your Spotify, search Daylist, and it's a really fun experience, but also a great example of how you go into your day list and at any given point, it'll show you your listening habits at that time of day within like a 4-hour window over the past 7 days. And then it has like a fun, cheeky persona of like your listening habits. So that's how I would answer your question about like, how are we thinking about AI from a consumer experience? It's only going to further enhance personalization, discovery. And then there's going to be a lot of fun and innovation that comes from it, such as like the version 2 of AI DJ that is now interactive.
Okay.
On the advertising side of things, The most simplistic example I can give you is what we're here talking a lot about at Cannes, which is our Gen AI audio ads. So we now have gotten to a point where marketers can come in and they can just give us either keywords, text, some attributes as to what the brand is looking for to engage within AI and audio ads. And in a matter of literally new marketers under 17 minutes can have multiple versions of audio ads created for them. So from that perspective, we've been beta testing that in the US and Canada. We just announced it in the UK this past week. But that's been pretty fun to see that we've already had over 1,500 advertisers test AI audio ads, and we've already seen over 7,000 ads created. So that's maybe just one example of how we're leveraging AI to, further enhance the marketing experience. And then, one more thing there is amidst all that, we're really honed in on automation with our platform and the Spotify Ad Exchange, as well as our self-service ads manager. But one key component of that is objective-based outcomes. So that's where marketers can, start to really get creative with their messaging, and then how we're, tying that to outcomes as well, to, back to your earlier question, find the right consumers for their brands on Spotify.
I remember talking to someone on your team a year ago now about some of the early versions of that, or the early workings of the AI ad creation. So it's fun to see where that's come in so little time, right? And I think that the interest and emphasis on self-serve and making it easy for lots of different types of customers is super smart. Yep. When we look at the two biggest ad sellers globally, right, Google and Meta, that's something that they've done very well. In terms of driving their growth. We just looked at, say, a breakdown in the report between the top 350 brands globally and all other advertisers. Those top 350 brands will really only make up 25% of the total market, right? Absolutely. So it's a huge TAM, or total addressable market, for everyone else. And making that accessible to them, I think, is super smart. Is that where, from a Spotify ads place, you see a lot of future growth coming from as you roll that out and add more, offerings or AI delivered or just human delivered innovations into that space?
Sure. Let me give you some perspective on the 75% versus the 25%. So the 75%, and it also kind of ties together, is let's go back to your report and what you're seeing. Not only are brands looking for more flexibility or agility, like we said, but quite frankly, marketers have just become a lot smarter about, leveraging all of their assets to deploy a campaign. So hands down, Spotify for the past couple of years, and earlier this year, we made some big announcements about our suite of products. So we announced the Spotify Ad Exchange, to where we're just fully enthralled in programmatic planning and buying with all the different, DSPs. And then we've always had Spotify Ads Manager, but equally just announced further iterations of that. So to answer your core question, yes, we're definitely seeing our largest growth and adoption into maybe more of those mid to long-tailed clients in all markets globally, leveraging those platforms. And again, our value there, I would say, is the simplistic pitch is we're just making it easier for brands to, create, buy, and measure on Spotify. So from those perspectives, I think what we're doing a little bit differently versus the earlier two you focused on is we're buying channel agnostic. So we're rolling out a plethora of first-party solutions Brand Lift or Pixel to contract conversions within Ads Manager. But then equally, like I said, for the brands that prefer more of programmatic, where a lot of that work is done on their back end, in-house, or with their agency, with their DSP, et cetera, we're just making it easier for brands to activate. So maybe a little bit of a long-winded answer on that 75%, but yes, we're seeing a ton of growth there. What's interesting with the 25%, the Global 350, let's say, as you called out, you're definitely seeing the same tactics, right? Shifts in upper funnel budgets, to more, performance-based budgets. But another thing that I've interestingly seen with the Global 350 is, I would say, more strategy focus or emphasis on international expansion. So the US is obviously a large economy, largest ad market, et cetera. But interestingly, a lot of the brands I think are, trying to figure out India and Brazil, as is Spotify, as examples. So I think that's where maybe the difference of like what we're seeing with the Global 350 is like they're just seeing opportunities. They're still focused on the US, but they're also seeing additional opportunities for growth outside of the US, given how large and growing those economies are, using India and Brazil as an example.
Huge. Young populations, growing middle class.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big populations. Yeah, and those are the two fastest of our top 10 markets, two fastest growing of our top 10 markets for sure this year, and they have been regularly. And then you also have countries like Mexico in there too, and Nigeria, I think, which are really interesting. So yeah, lots of future opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's finish with one fun thing. I think there's been a lot around tech announcements recently, and including things like immersive tech, moving into glasses, goggles. Maybe I was at CES, there was a lot with screens, like what you could be doing and where advertising could show up in the future. Anything personally you've been looking at, or tech that you use or are keen to see coming into the future?
Okay, so again, let me answer that twofold. Like one, I would say, when it comes to actual tech adoption, contrary to this wonderful company, I'm not the most innovative, like forward-thinking, person. I look to my kids for that. But what I would say, what's fascinating about what you called out with the different screens is, it's definitely extremely top of mind even for us as a brand. The question is whether it's AI or just these new places where consumers are going to be interacting. It's previously, meaning most recently, you're building for the mobile phone, right? Now it's like, gosh, is like that going to be the next 10 years, or are you going to be building for wearable devices, like you said, whether it's watches or goggles, or is there going to be, some future-facing, hologram thing you have to build for? So from that perspective, I personally can't really comment on anything in particular I've seen there.
Yeah.
But what I will say is like it is going to be exciting to see how hardware changes and ultimately changes what is the next evolution of consumer interaction, and does it go beyond what is currently, the cell phone to other facets. I think the other thing that we're constantly thinking about, and we saw it in the early days of like hardware with like the at-home assistants, is voice.
Yes.
So voice is gonna change everything with like, you look at, I look at my kids and how much they're doing all their searches and queries solely off of voice, how much, their voice to text, et cetera. So I think that's another thing that like we have to think through is like, what does personalization and discovery look like if it's all being done through, voice?
Yeah.
So I'd say like that's where we're at. Something for me personally, to answer the personal question, I think, we've talked about a lot about AI. You talked about AI a lot in your report. So from my perspective, I think I'm very excited about just learning how AI is creating, just let's call it operational efficiencies in my daily professional and personal life. So we had a fun chat before this about like even your report. I was reading through your report, but then I was using AI to give me key takeaways I might have missed. I shared your report with my team. Someone immediately put it in Notebook LM and turned it into a podcast. I mean, that's amazing. Like to think that like you could take a very extensive report and then just in a matter of minutes turn it into a podcast to digest that content. So I think just what's happening right now in AI is very inspiring.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This was great. We have the rest of the week to look forward to, so I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. But Brian, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Have a great week. Thank you.